Staring at all the windows in the prison fortified with a foot-thick layer of reinforced steel, Michael felt a deep sense of frustration. The escape route he had meticulously planned was now completely sealed off. But in order to extract James, whom the mysterious organization desperately needed out of prison, he had to come up with another plan, and fast. The reason was urgent. He had only 4 days left before the final deadline for the escape. Otherwise, his nephew LJ would meet a grim fate. Just when Michael was at his wit's end, T-Bag approached and handed him a letter. Upon opening it, Michael found a sketch of Lechero's room, seemingly marked with the time and password for entry. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the two arrived at Lechero's room and entered the password according to the instructions on the sketch. The first door opened as expected, and they passed through a narrow storage room. To Michael's surprise, there was a second door at the end of the corridor. He tried the same password he had used before, but he didn't realize that James had quietly pulled out a dagger. It turned out that following the last failed escape attempt, the company had lost patience and decided to storm the prison violently at 5 o'clock that afternoon. They had instructed James to make sure Michael was eliminated before leaving. Just as James was about to strike, footsteps were suddenly heard in the distance. The newcomer was Lechero, who had recently joined the escape team. To prevent Michael and James from escaping on their own, Lechero had not marked this door's password on the sketch. Thus, only he knew it. Lechero led them to a whole new world. It turned out that Sona prison once had areas A and B. After a riot in the prison last year, the guards blew up the underground passage connecting the two areas. All prisoners were moved to Area B, and Area A became the guards' luxury apartments. Lechero had once wanted to dig through the passage to escape but ultimately gave up due to the enormity of the task. Knowing Michael was a structural engineer, he figured Michael might have a solution.
Yeah, I mean a couple of payloaders.
Jokes aside, if horizontal digging wasn't feasible, perhaps vertical digging upwards could work. This way, they could reach the vicinity of the prison's wire mesh, waiting for the right moment to escape through the previously corroded wire mesh. However, the difficulty in digging upwards lay in the need to install supports within the diameter of the hole to prevent collapse and avoid being buried alive. Yet, James seemed utterly uninterested in the new escape plan, as there were only 45 minutes left until the violent prison break. Upon exiting, Michael took the initiative to close the door, asking Lechero to clarify the exact location they would emerge in the entry area. But just then Sammy goes to the storeroom to serve the newly recruited henchman a drink, and Michael and James rush to hide in fear. Lechero, of course, couldn't let Sammy know about the escape.
Offer them something good. Don't make me look the fool.
The rum is for me, Sammy. Oh? You have a problem with that?
So he refused Sammy's request. This snub led Sammy to harbor thoughts of rebellion against Lechero. After Lechero and Sammy left the storage room, Michael made a beeline for the second door. Now, knowing only he and Michael were downstairs, Lechero couldn't kill Michael, so James had to hide the dagger.
Hey, only Lechero has the code.
We don't need a code.
I'll get inside.
While Michael races to dig through the tunnel, James is on pins and needles, claiming to suffer from claustrophobia and unable to stay in confined spaces. James hurriedly ran outside. Lechero arrived in the storage room just in time to say Sammy had left, and Michael very reluctantly followed him upstairs. After coming out, Michael looked everywhere for something to support the tunnel, but he accidentally found James on the rooftop, nervously staring at the ceiling. Michael walked over and casually removed the ceiling panel, revealing a narrow space not suitable for someone with claustrophobia.
Hate to break up the brouhaha, gentlemen, but Lechero would like to see you. Says it has something to do with your big brother.
Michael went to Lechero's room, where it turned out Lincoln had called about something very urgent. Since Michael had once stolen Lechero's phone, Lincoln knew Lechero's phone number. After calling back, Michael learned that an agent had attempted to shoot Lincoln outside, but Lincoln had managed to turn the tables. Considering James's strange behavior that day, Michael finally realized what was going on.
They don't need us anymore.
Here we go.
They're breaking him out on their own.
By then, James had climbed onto a platform, waiting for the company's rescue. Michael hurried to the spot where he last saw James and also arrived at the rooftop. The two exchanged blows in a fierce fistfight. Meanwhile, a guard in the watchtower spotted the helicopter, but he couldn't make out the faces of the two escapees. After reporting the situation to his superiors, the guard was immediately taken out by the helicopter's gunman. James kicked away from Michael and grabbed hold of the rope ladder as it descended, Michael rushed over and took a flying leap to hold onto James. He believed that if James got away, LJ and he would both be silenced. More and more guards gathered below, and the helicopter's gunman was also taken out. Unable to withstand Michael's pulling, the two ended up back on the rooftop. The rescue mission ended in failure.
Mission failure. Return to base 1 immediately.
The cunning James quickly got up, jumped down through the ventilation shaft, and even managed to take off his shirt in the process. The prison alarm blared urgently at that moment. Michael also ran back to his cell to change clothes, but as soon as he came out, he was caught by a guard. When Michael was dragged to the yard, it was already filled with kneeling prisoners. General Zavala scrutinized each person's face and finally approached Michael, ordering him to stand up. You've been in Sona prison for less than a month, and 2 major escape incidents have occurred. Tell me, is all this just a coincidence? Although Michael tried his best to explain that he was not involved, Zavala slapped him to the ground.
You've caused too many problems here in Sona. So maybe you shouldn't be here in Sona. Llévenlo.
Say goodbye to Sona, Mr. Scofield.
This was the most brutal punishment in Sona prison. In the scorching heat nearing 40 degrees Celsius, Michael was confined in a cage made entirely of iron, which was covered with a plastic film that allowed only his head to breathe. It's well known that iron conducts heat exceptionally well, and the plastic film creates an effect where heat gathers but hardly dissipates. Anyone spending a day in this steam cage would inevitably turn into a dried corpse, devoid of any moisture. Zavala demanded that Michael reveal the origin of the helicopter that attacked the prison, but Michael, fearing the company's retribution and their propensity for breaking promises, stubbornly refused to speak. Only minutes after being locked up, Michael was drenched in sweat and nearly fainted. He tried several times to muster the strength to tear off the plastic film, but severe dehydration had taken its toll, making even standing up a luxury he couldn't afford. Of course, Zavala couldn't let Michael die so quickly. He ordered his men to bring a cup of water. Coincidentally, gravedigger Sucre came to bury a body and, seeing Michael on the brink of death, offered to help him drink. Seeing Sucre, Michael found a bit of strength to stand up. He knew this cup of water wouldn't save him. Michael had already given up hope on survival, but after persistent persuasion from Sucre, Michael drank the water. Michael urged Sucre not to get involved in the escape plan anymore and to leave Panama to reunite with his wife and child as soon as possible. However, Sucre, bound by a deep sense of brotherhood and loyalty, secretly resolved to rescue Michael. As the sun became increasingly vicious, Zavala occasionally came to tempt Michael, promising that he could return to an air-conditioned room immediately if he disclosed the identities of the attackers. Michael was well aware that the mysterious company's reach and power were far beyond what he, a mere prison warden, could contend with. Moreover, if he revealed any information about the company, his nephew LJ would certainly be killed. However, Zavala told Michael a story that subtly changed his stance. In Panama, there once was a notorious drug lord backed by an army of hundreds of thugs. They committed unspeakable acts of violence against anyone who stood in their way, to the extent that even the government and police dared not confront him directly. People said he was unstoppable, but now, this drug lord was personally delivered into Sona prison by me. He is Lechero, whom you all know, and now, I hold the power over life and death for Lechero.
From the moment I got here, I've been planning my escape.
He's talking.
How do you know?
You can't get out of the box any other way.
Seeing Michael being released from the steam cage, James panicked because McGrady had told him that prisoners locked up there were never released unless they cooperated. In Zavala's air-conditioned office, Michael divulged everything about the company, James, and the plot against his brother. It didn't take long for Zavala to bring James in for interrogation.
What's he talking about?
You know nothing about this?
No. Schofield's a smart man, but he's got a rabid imagination.
So you're calling him a liar?
More or less.
The next second, Zavala ordered a set of torture tools to be brought in, but before the electric plug was even inserted, James, fearing for his life, confessed everything.
Are you working with Schofield? Yes, I'm working with Schofield!
James revealed that his contact was Gretchen Morgan, who had orchestrated the violent prison break, but he didn't know Gretchen's address. Michael said he had a way, needing only to borrow Zavala's phone.
Mike.
Michael, what phone are you on?
Just listen to me. I need to know where and when your next meeting with Susan B. is.
Garfield Price Building downtown in an hour. Why?
Garfield Price, 1 hour.
Soon, Gretchen, who was meeting with Lincoln, was captured and brought back, but she claimed she didn't know James. Zavala, not wanting to waste words on Gretchen, immediately started torturing her.
Abre la manguera!
Yes or no?
No.
You prove one thing. This is not your first time.
Faced with a tough nut to crack, Zavala then had James and Michael confront Gretchen directly. Under James's identification, Gretchen had no choice but to confess. However, she claimed she was just a runner and that the real boss was in a place tens of kilometers away. She could lead Zavala to him. Zavala is a man of action. Without a moment's delay, he immediately took Gretchen to capture the person, but he overestimated himself. To capture the head of the company, he only brought a driver. As expected, as soon as Zavala opened the warehouse door, Gretchen took the opportunity to attack, and both were killed. The news of Zavala's death quickly spread to the prison. With the leader dead, the investigation into the escape had to be temporarily suspended. Under the escort of prison guards, James and Michael were once again brought back to the prison. Although there was tension between them, they had no choice but to continue working towards their common goal of escape. This is the most classic scene of Bellick in the Prison Break series, where you will witness the birth of the legendary boxer, Bellick. Upon his arrival at Sona prison, he was barely clothed, licking mud from the ground, enduring utter humiliation. By scavenging clothes from dead bodies, he successfully obtained a pair of shoes along with a navel-revealing outfit, leopard print pants. Today marks Bellick's 15th day in prison, and he's no longer the newbie who knew nothing about prison life. Yet, when someone vomited on the ground, Sammy's minion, Octavio, still demanded Bellick clean it up. Bellick knew that showing weakness here would only invite more bullying, so he pretended to be fierce and pushed Octavio away, not anticipating that Octavio would step on the vomit. However, Bellick returned to his cell only to find a chicken foot on his pillow. He was dumbfounded. This was the most brutal duel token in Sona prison. If someone throws a chicken foot at you, it means you must duel, and refusal is not an option until one of the parties is beaten to death. Terrified, Bellick immediately sought Lechero, hoping he could stop the duel. But Sammy, already revealing his ambitions to become the new leader and insisting on protecting his own, bypassed Lechero and announced the duel would take place in 15 minutes. Lechero hears him in the room and asks Sammy why he's holding the duel without permission. He's the boss here. But Sammy only responded with a contemptuous laugh.
It's not your place.
Maybe it should be.
Sensing a looming disaster, Teabag, fearing for his own safety if Lechero falls, immediately sought out James, who was planning an escape. To make a deal, if he could eliminate Sammy, he would be included in the escape team. After all, if Sammy took over, accessing the storage room to dig the tunnel would be impossible. James agreed to Teabag's request without hesitation. The yard was buzzing with noise, and the betting odds reached a staggering 100 to 1, as no one believed Bellick, looking like he was 6 months pregnant, could survive. Bellick, extremely nervous, was frantically searching for something. Once he found it, his eyes lit up, and he wrapped his fists with cloth strips like a boxer about to enter the ring. Then, mysteriously, he stuffed cotton balls into his nose. Octavio, with his 8-pack abs, was already eager. Bellick, wearing an inappropriate belly shirt and shuffling in small steps, made a dazzling entrance. However, before Bellick could look cool for even a second, Octavio hit him in the face with a headbutt, followed by a barrage of punches and kicks that left Bellick powerless to fight back. Octavio exuded the aura of a king. Unexpectedly, Bellick, tough as old boots, charged forward, not going for the kill but instead covering Octavio's mouth and nose. Octavio managed to break free, but suddenly he felt unsteady and his vision began to blur. Bellick didn't give Octavio a chance to fight back, using a knee strike combined with a flurry of punches, and ending the fight with a stylish uppercut. The audience erupted in cheers, and even Bellick couldn't believe he had won the fight. Excited, he tore off the cloth from his hands, loudly expressing his thrill and joy, but he didn't notice Teabag quietly observing his nostrils.
Congratulations. You're just a regular Buster Douglas, aren't you? Hey, what is this? How'd you get that up there, huh?
It turns out, before the duel, Bellick had smeared acetone on the cloth, Acetone is a colorless, volatile liquid that acts as a central nervous system depressant, so he cheated to defeat the formidable Octavio. Teabag picked up the cloth, sniffed it, and once again, he had dirt on someone, but Bellick was indifferent. Ever since he beat the skilled fighter Octavio, Bellick started to get carried away, boasting about his fighting skills everywhere. He would explain to anyone how awesome he was and how he adjusted his mindset to win after receiving the chicken foot. With men looking at Bellick in admiration, Teabag approached the overconfident Bellick and led him away. He threatened Bellick to challenge Sammy using the same method to eliminate him, or else he would expose his cheating. But if he succeeds, he could join the escape team and break out together. Escaping the prison was Bellick's dream, and considering how easily he won the previous duel, he waved his arm, eager to try. Sure enough, the overconfident Bellick actually approached Sammy.
Do we come to you if we need the chicken foot?
Tiger Pants. Who you got beef with?
I don't know his name. Some Caribbean guy. Stole my wallet a while back.
Better think long and hard before you say another word, eh?
He's got this fruity little mustache and this ugly ass vest.
Please. I'm begging you.
The applause from the prisoners below thundered through the sky, as no one had dared to throw a chicken foot at Sammy after so long in Sona prison. Dozens had dueled with Sammy before, and the weeds over their graves were already over 2 meters tall. Bellick was indeed a man. However, when Bellick opened the acetone box, he was instantly dumbfounded, because someone had mistaken it for trash and emptied it, leaving not a drop left.
Got any more acetone around here?
No, that's it. Look, I can't go against Sammy straight up. I'm a dead man.
If you don't kill him, we are all dead.
Bellick was instantly dumbfounded, deflating like a punctured balloon and reverting back to his cowardly self. However, calling off the duel was now impossible. Upstairs, Sammy was warming up, his massive chest muscles on par with Bellick's large belly. With the duel time fast approaching, an extremely anxious Bellick was still searching for something to replace the acetone.
It's time. Stop his face, Brad! You know, this has all been one big misunderstanding. I wasn't talking about Sammy. It was. That's him. That's the guy I was talking about.
Yeah, I don't see no fruity mustache. And where's his ugly ass vest, Brad? Don't worry. You stand a real chance at winning this one.
But time was running out, and seeing that begging for mercy was useless, Bellick could only feign calmness and raise his hands in a mock gesture of readiness. Sammy also approached the arena, pushing through the crowd and stylishly throwing a chicken foot onto the ground. However, the life and death duel ended before it even began. Under Sammy's relentless punches, Bellick was beaten to a pulp, not having even the slightest chance to fight back. And in the end, he was pressed down and spun around in circles, watching Bellick being humiliated. Teabag couldn't bear to look. After humiliating Bellick, Sammy was about to end Bellick's life with a chokehold when suddenly shouts from his men upstairs interrupted. Since Michael emerged from the steam cage, he had been hiding in the tunnel with James and Mahone, digging an escape tunnel. The tunnel was already over 1 meter deep, and to prevent the entrance from collapsing, Mahone and James were desperately supporting the wood planks. Michael, holding a short piece of rebar, climbed up and inserted a wedge into the gap, stabilizing the wood planks upon release. True talents don't rely on brute force but on being well-rounded and knowledgeable. However, to dig deeper, more wood planks for support were needed. With loud shouts outside, the trio was unclear about what was happening and immediately went up to check. But upon emerging, they were discovered by Sammy's men, who were armed, forcing the trio to hurriedly retreat back into the tunnel. James, running last, was tackled to the ground. To keep the escape plan secret, Mahone had no choice but to close the password-protected door, since Michael's escape attempt from Sammy's room nearly got Sammy shot by prison guards. Sammy harbored deep hatred for Michael. Hearing his men say they found Michael, Sammy dropped Bellick and ran towards the basement. Arriving at the password door, Sammy pointed a gun at James, threatening Michael to open the door. Although Michael was reluctant to let James be killed, the rational Mahone quickly stopped him. Going out was akin to suicide. Staying in might provide a chance to figure out a solution. Michael, thoughtful, carefully removed something from the wood plank. Mahone also found a stone sword and handed it to Michael for self-defense. Seeing the door remained closed, Sammy returned to the yard. Bellick thought Sammy was going to kill him and immediately fell to his knees and begged for mercy. But Sammy didn't care to kill this weakling. He went straight to Lechero, who was watching from the back.
Come along, Norman. Let's go.
Sammy threatened Lechero to reveal the password, tensions rising between them. But just then, Michael suddenly opened the door, and everyone rushed in, immediately spotting the large hole not far away. Even a fool could guess they were planning an escape. Michael no longer hid the escape plan, laying it all out and even inviting Sammy to join. But Sammy, wanting the escape plan for himself, declared that none of them would leave, and climbed up to check the construction progress. However, the next second, a massive amount of sand and soil buried Sammy alive. Not even giving him a chance to scream, Mahone was the first to react, knocking down a minion beside him with an elbow strike, while Lechero picked up a gun from the ground and successfully took out the remaining minions with a few shots. Michael stared blankly at the hole. This was his first time indirectly killing someone, as he had just removed the very rebar that caused the collapse. Afterwards, Lechero dragged the bodies out, kicking Sammy's body down to the second floor, declaring his regained control over the prison. Although Bellick did not win the duel, he still contributed and ultimately joined the elite escape team. Now, with no more obstacles within the prison, it was time to consider how to deal with the guards in the watchtowers. Though the human threats were dealt with, an unexpected heavy rainstorm plunged the escape team into another major crisis.